We talk a lot about the future of mobility. I mean, right now, the way a lot of people travel around, the way I do, I drive into work in something like this Citroen C4 Cactus, which I've had for the week. Very nice it's been too. But to actually get around in the city, well, you want something that's a little bit more modern and versatile. Now, some cities have those unlockable scooters. I carry my own one with me. It just means you've got that extra level of freedom to get around. But what if you could combine those concepts together and find something that was equally easy to pick up as an electric scooter, but had some of the practicality of a car? Well, today we're looking at this, the Citroen AMI 1, a concept that marries together a couple of different ideas. The idea that a car can still bring, value to your life, driving yourself somewhere where there's room for yourself, a passenger, and some luggage. Gives you the safety of a cocoon, something that can keep you safe from other road goers and indeed from the elements, but that is easy to jump in, that you don't necessarily need a full driver's license to be able to drive. This marries those two things together. But in true Citroen fashion, it's what if a 2CV met a mobile phone. And the mobile phone actually plays a huge part of this car. If you come around here, you can see that the interior of the car is modern Spartan. There isn't much going on at all. It's developed with a kind of a self-driving but still ride-sharing future in mind. The surfaces on the interior have that kind of plain aviation plastic feel to them that still make them nice to look at, but easy to clean and easy to maintain. You feel at home in it pretty quickly. There's room for luggage inside, so you can pack stuff behind the driver's seats, and there's a nice little cubby in the front of the passenger section, but everything's open, so you're unlikely to lose things. The car also looks forward to a future where manufacturing simplicity has been built in, but not just as a practicality, it's actually become a design feature. These doors, on the driver's side, the door opens like a suicide door, giving you quick and easy access. But on the passenger side, for safety, it opens like a regular door. But that means that the doors are identical, and there's a lot of symmetry left and right, back to front, that makes the car easier to manufacture, but gives it a cute little look. The open roof as well here reminds you of the 2CV, that kind of open, airy driving, and inside the cabin as well, it just feels so open and light. You're not going to be tearing around at breakneck speeds, but that's not the point. It's a way of getting you and the few things you need to carry with you to the next place. By integrating your phone and being able to be unlocked in a normal urban environment, it gives you a lot of flexibility. We look a lot at the future of mobility, and a lot of it is autonomous driving, where essentially we're not going to pay too much attention to the vehicle we're in the same way that you might not pay much attention to a train you ride. But this still holds on to the idea that we want to drive ourselves, that we want to still be in control of getting ourselves around the city. It still recognizes that we might want to take a passenger with us and have some luggage to take around. But it embraces the idea that we want to be able to pick something up on the street and take it for a ride in the same way like in cities like Paris and San Francisco you can do right now with scooters, or in London with bicycles. It takes a lot of the way we're changing the way we look at mobility now and applying it to a concept car. And actually today, they're going to let me drive it. Now, we're quite used to seeing concept cars, but very rarely do we actually get the chance to drive them. But that's exactly what I'm about to do. So, very simple controls. This has been designed to be driven by someone who doesn't have a full driver's license, by someone in France that could be as young as 14. So it's kept very simple. Foot on the brake, start the engine, turn to drive, and go. Now there's a complete simplicity to the interior's layout for a reason. The whole idea is that it doesn't seem intimidating. It seems easy to just jump in and drive, in the same way that you might see an electric scooter as something that a young person can just pick up and drive with. That's the mentality behind this car. There aren't a plethora of controls. There's an indicator, which is fairly easy to get your head around, stop and go pedal like you would expect, and if you're in trouble, big red button for the hazards right there. Apart from neutral, drive and reverse, there's no complexity to the car for that exact reason. Top speed is restricted, so that not only is it safer to drive in an urban environment, but you could drive it with a far less complex driver's license. Just a few recognitions that you can do, recognize traffic signs and actually operate in normal traffic. The concept of the car in terms of bringing two things together, we're told, is what if a 2CV and a mobile phone met? What if those two things were fused together? Considering how complicated a mobile phone is, but on the other hand, how completely universal it is in how people can access it. You don't need to get your head around every aspect of how a mobile phone works just to be able to use it. And the 2CV, well, 2CV when it came out was a car designed to suit drivers of that era. In that era, France was largely agricultural, the roads weren't paved, and people had to transport eggs or livestock over rutted fields. Now we don't have those troubles to deal with anymore, but we have congested cities, we've got challenging environments of a different kind, and that's what cars like this are envisaged to build. But what's most interesting to me is that this still requires you to drive. It's easier to drive than a car and obviously not as fast, but in a world where we're seeing everything moving towards a more autonomous future where cars drive themselves, this is still very much putting you in control. You jump in, you drive. Yes, it's looking at a ride-sharing future. Yes, it's looking at an environment where you might not necessarily own your car, but in the same way how in cities like San Francisco or Paris, you can go up and unlock a scooter on the street, jump in and drive to where you need to go. That's the ethos that this car is part of. That same ease of travel with an electric scooter. The way I love getting around the city. Like that, but with room for a passenger. There is safety built in, there's bumpers on each of the corners. The car isn't going to get up to highest speed, so you don't need to worry too much about high-speed collisions in cities. But it's a cocoon of safety that you don't get in an electric scooter out on the road, and trust me, as someone who does that from time to time, those can feel a bit treacherous. But this embraces that same ethos, and the whole idea of electrification being minimized. The batteries in this car are used to drive the car. Everything else you bring with you in your pocket via your mobile phone. This heads-up display feeds off the app. No matter what infotainment system a car comes with, personally, I always end up using my phone. And this just takes advantage of that. You put your phone in here, and this mirror just shows you the app as you need to use it. It shows you Waze or Spotify, the apps that you actually want to use yourself. It's embracing the way we actually use cars rather than trying to tell us how to do things, which is what car infotainment systems have done well since they very first started. The simplicity of the car extends to the steering wheel. Now the phone connects to the car via Bluetooth, but it's just connecting to the speaker right down here for your music, infotainment and directions, and to the buttons on the steering wheel. These buttons up here allow you to connect to the app and scroll through your options that you might have there, access voice control, that kind of thing. So you're really getting to rely on the complexity and functionality of your mobile phone without necessarily having to tax the car's batteries and, the interior design. It's minimalist, but it works. Now, in the same way that the 2CV solved a lot of the issues that people had in those days and gave people the ability to get around, this concept again tries to look at a future where people don't want to spend a huge amount of money getting their driver's license and putting in time into something that doesn't really make sense to them, and still opens up the ability to drive yourself to your destination, to get yourself moving, to be mobile. Sometimes we cringe at the phrase mobility solutions, but this is a mobility solution. Not for everyone, but for a lot of people, and not for every use, but for a lot of them. In the same way that I keep an electric scooter in the trunk of my car, having one of these dotted around the city to be able to jump in and out of, it makes a lot of sense. So that's your short distance inner city traveling taken care of, and many reports suggest that in 50 years time the vast majority of the global population will live in cities. But what if you want to travel a little bit further? Citroën have, in addition to the AME1, shown us this, the 1919 concept. 1919 being the year that Citroën was founded, this being its centenary. This is for all the other driving you're meant to do, for not those short city drives, but those long distance drives, perhaps Paris to Nice or London to Manchester, where you want to be able to get in a car that you control, that takes you from door to door, but that does it in comfort and style. Still level 3 autonomous, but still with the idea that you are driving it yourself. Potentially with rideshare, but more based around you having access to the car. The interior of the car has more of a living room feel to it because it's somewhere where you do want to spend a bit more time. The idea isn't to have Rolls-Royce levels of luxury, but they're not messing around. The idea around this is one of a living room space, in the same way where you might have different types of living room furniture, maybe an armchair, a couch, and a chaise longue. The 1919 concept creates that living room on wheels by offering different people in different seats a different experience. The passenger, for example, has a more reclined, relaxing, almost sleepy-like pose to draw upon, whereas the driver will have a more upright affair, and maybe the kids in the back have more of a playful couch. It's treating the car not like how we look at it now, where 4 identical seats are dotted around the car, giving an identical experience. I mean, why shouldn't the passenger have more of a relaxed position than someone who might be asked to drive the car themselves? There's something quite logical to that. Now, although Citroën doesn't envisage this as being a hugely expensive car necessarily, still something that's affordable, they don't want to forgo on the design touches, and in typical French fashion, it's quite outlandish. There are chevrons literally everywhere, chevrons being the Citroën logo, of course, from the inlay in the furniture to these restraints for luggage in the back. But there's also nice little touches like the steering wheel and this center unit here being made of a marble-like plastic. There is barely any switchgear whatsoever, everything intensively controlled by voice, with just the gear selector there as its one place for user interface. 2 little LiDAR units there on the roof hopefully will add with stability when this thing gets up to its top speed of potentially over 100 miles an hour if it could. But this might look at a future where the 2 ideas, the AMI 1 and this the 1919 concept, cover between them your entire range of needs that you might have from a car. Your short jaunt down to the shops, or your travel down to see grandma at the weekends. Between these 2 ideas, that could have everything covered, and with over 800 kilometers of range, that's enough to get you across most countries relatively easily. But as I said, they're going to let me drive it, so let's have a go. Now obviously this is a concept car. The fact that it moves is brilliant, but it is in no way a representation of a final car's performance. Otherwise I might be commenting on the fact that the steering wheel is right up against my knees. I can barely get my hands under it, let alone turn the thing, and I bumped my head twice just trying to get in. That's not what's important. What's important is the exercise this represents in trying to figure out what could a future car be. And we've seen cars describe themselves as, you know, future concept cars, as living rooms on wheels, but it's all very much level 5 autonomy with the seats spun around and everyone's facing into the middle of the car. This still very much focuses around, you know, you're going to have to drive this for the first and last miles, and you could, in theory, pick up the drive at any point. This is still very much, this seat is for a driver. But the rest of the car definitely feels more like an interesting living room, and it shows that Citroën are really thinking about not just a completely autonomous future, but something where there is still a level of driving yourself. There are no dials or anything like that. The idea is that would all be projected up onto the windscreen in a heads-up display, giving you all the driving information you need. And presumably then it can all switch off when you go autonomous. There's a screen down here at your feet, which is a weird position for it, but apparently you could then use that for a movie. And this central column here is designed to have an autonomous AI bot thing like a Google Home or Amazon Alexa that allows you to give the car instructions in the same way that you now ask to add stuff to your shopping list. It's a great exercise in looking forward. What I like most about it is the design. It doesn't look, you know, like a Rolls-Royce or even what Aston Martin's doing with the Lagondas. This looks like a Paris-Dakar racer. This looks beefy. I like that. The materials are meant to be nice and comfortable and, you know, casual, but still comfortable. Not necessarily luxurious, But in the same way that, you know, great IKEA furniture can be very comfortable, but still be efficient and cost effective and cheap, but still well designed. This resin material that we see on the steering wheel and in the center console, you know, doesn't feel massively expensive, but it does give a nice little touch of class. It shows that thought is going into it. Interior design doesn't have to be all about function. It can be about design and creating a pleasant place to be, not just despite it being a car, but because of how it's been put together. Even the belt buckles on the seat belts, I think, look fantastic. This is far off in terms of where we are right now with cars, but it's concepts like these that help us see what might be coming in the future.